What's up, Pitt fans? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Just me, Noah Hiles, coming to you. Chris Carter, busy travel schedule with covering the Combine last week, and I think he's already in Greensboro, North Carolina, which I didn't even know until I went on Twitter a couple of minutes ago. But nonetheless, we will be reunited tomorrow as I make my drive down there to cover the ACC tournament with him. But until then, I'm just going to handle the mailbag solo here on Monday when we record, and for you all to enjoy on YouTube Tuesday. A lot of great questions. The regular season is over. The Panthers finished 21-10 overall, 14-6 in the ACC, and enter the ACC tournament, as the number 5 seed. So let's just get right into it. We're going to have a lot of questions about the postseason and all things Pitt hoops. So we'll start off here with Ralph with an absolute banger of a question. I love this one. What are the chances we see a Pitt-Penn State first-round NCAA tournament matchup in Dayton? And if so, who has the advantage? As a sports writer, I don't really root for, I don't say really. I don't root for really any team right now, especially, at the collegiate level. I root for my alma mater, Division III, go Mount Union. But, Pitt and Penn State, I root for good stories. And that is an incredible story. If the Panthers and the Nittany Lions meet up in Dayton, one, I would be all for it just because of the atmosphere that would exist in Dayton. You'd have the entire state of Pennsylvania take over that city in Ohio, and that would be a blast just the days leading up to it. But I also think it would be a really good game. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Pitt would probably be out of the Dayton conversation with the win Wednesday over Georgia Tech or Florida State, which I believe will happen. And if Pitt doesn't win that game, it might not make the tournament altogether. I think it deserves to make the tournament. But if it does, it will go to Dayton there. But I'm not so sure that Penn State is a Dayton team either at this point. It had a strong finish to its schedule, and I'm not counting the Nittany Lions out in the Big Ten tournament either. So with that being said, I don't know if either of these teams are Dayton, but let's just play along with Ralph's hypothetical and say they do both end up in Dayton, and that's the matchup. It's Pitt-Penn State. I'll say this. The Nittany Lions are playing better basketball right now. Their best wins of the season have come recently, where Pitt isn't playing its best basketball right now. It's lost its last 3 road games. It's entering the ACC tournament on a 2-game losing streak. Assuming Pitt goes to Dayton, it'd probably be on a 3-game losing streak. And in that matchup, Penn State has the best player on the court. And that's not anything against Jamarius Burton or Blake Hinson or anyone else on Pitt. But Jalen Pickett, in my opinion, is an All-American. Just by the way he's performed this year. And you've got other guys too, like Funk, who can shoot the lights out from the outside. But Pickett's the best player, and Penn State's playing the best basketball. I still give the edge to Pitt. Despite Penn State entering the game with a little bit more momentum, having the best player, and coming from a better conference, I think Pitt is a better coach team. I think Pitt's a little deeper. And I just really like how Pitt has played in high-pressure situations this year. And that sounds ironic considering that this team only needed to win 1 game last week for a share of the ACC title and the number 1 seed in the conference tournament, and that didn't happen. You could say that they folded under pressure, and that's a solid rebuttal to what I just pointed out. But overall, in high-pressure situations and games, this group has performed really well. I like the veteran backcourt, and that's probably why I'd give Pitt just a slight edge over Penn State, although I'm rooting for that matchup. It'd be a lot of fun to cover either way. We'll move on now. Johnny wants to know, if Pitt loses its first game in the ACC tournament, does it still make the dance? So I kind of discussed this in the last one. I would like to think so, yes. However, it's going to be a very tense back end of the week for Jeff Capel's team and anyone who's rooting for that team, because you're going to spend the rest of the week rooting against the thing that everyone loves in March Madness, and that's the underdog. It's the upset. And Pitt needs all of those teams on the bubble to do what it did if it loses Wednesday, and that's to have an early exit. It can't have any miracle runs from an Oklahoma State or a Wisconsin or an Oregon or an Arizona State or a Michigan. Teams like that who could come and make a deep run and be a little bit of a disruptor. Bubble chaos would not be good for the Panthers in that scenario. And again, it can all be avoided with a win, but this question was, what happens if Pitt does not win? I still think it'll be fine. I think it's definitely heading to Dayton if it loses. But there's a chance Pitt won't make the dance if some of those teams I just mentioned, along with others, have a better week in their respective league tournament. So, yeah, winning Wednesday is very important for the Panthers. Dan wants to know, who has been Pitt's most valuable player this season? Blake Hinson, Jamarius Burton, Nelly Cummings, or someone else? I think you could make the argument that Pitt's had a ton of valuable efforts this year. You could point to guys like Nelly Cummings being a true point guard and getting others involved. You could point to Federico and the workload that he's taken on since John Hughley, announced that he'd missed the rest of the season, and really just put the entire front court on Fetty's shoulders, and his play got better from it. And there's other guys too, like Nike Savande, the ACC's sixth man of the year. That's incredible value to have that type of presence coming off the bench every single game, and having a guy as a sixth man that you can rely upon to play 20 to 30 solid minutes a night. But Pitt's most valuable player is Jamarius Burton. If you just look at the way this team's journey started, there are really only two people now who play big factors that were around last year. And Jamarius was the only returning starter. I mean, Hughley was as well. And you've got guys on the bench like Nate Santos who are around it for it additionally as well. But Jamarius is the only returning starter who's here now still playing. And Jeff Capel and the coaching staff were here, and they kind of weathered all of the storm, all the highs and the lows. And it had to have been tough, but you just look, and JB's been a huge leader for this team. I've got some stories running later this week that will delve a little bit more into that, just on how he's really been like the steady, calm presence in the locker room, at practice, off the court, during all the adversity. And then you just look at his numbers. He's the best player on the court. He doesn't lead the Panthers in assists, rebounds, or scoring, but he's in the mix near the top for all of those categories. He plays a ton of minutes, and he can do a lot of different things. There are some games where he doesn't need to be the top scorer. He can just get others involved. And there are other times where he just takes completely over, like the North Carolina game where he had 31 points. So I just think for his versatility on the court, for his leadership off the court, and you combine all of that, he's been the MVP. There are other guys who have also had fantastic years, but I think that Jamarius Burton is probably the most unreplaceable part to this whole machine that is the Pitt basketball team. All right, so Eileen wants to know, is the Pitt women's basketball job an undesirable one? How does the AD respond to that description? Well, if you didn't see, Pitt basketball Pitt women's basketball, announced that Lance White will no longer be the head coach. He had a 5-year stretch where there just simply wasn't enough winning. And I think that 5 years is fair enough for any program to, make an accurate assessment on how a coach has performed. And Lance was a very nice guy. I had the chance to meet him at ACC tip-off before the season started, and he was very polite and everything. But the reality is they just weren't winning games, and a change needed to be made. I think that was felt universally. Is that the right word? Regardless, it was felt throughout the entire athletic department. But I wouldn't say Pitt's an undesirable job. I think there's a lot of selling points with Pitt. One, I mean, it has a great basketball venue. As someone who's traveled to all the ACC road games this year, the Peterson Event Center is a solid facility. And I think that there have been a lot of additions made recently since Capel's tenure, where you see just locker rooms and training facilities and stuff like that. Heather Likes really provided the basketball programs with the tools to, build a successful program. And more on Heather Lyke, I think that's why this opportunity would be an attractive opening for a lot of quality coaching candidates. Is look at how other athletic programs have developed under Heather Lyke's tenure with the university. You just look at something like women's soccer and what it was and now what it is, and just all these new sports teams that are popping up, and just the development and support that the coaching staff gets, that the program itself gets. I think that that's worth giving a shot at being a head coach for. I do. And it's an ACC program. And let's not forget, people have won at Pitt with Pitt women's basketball. I remember growing up watching Pitt women's hoops play in the NCAA tournament. And the last two coaches, I think, have led the Panthers to at least the NIT, if not the big dance. Could be mistaken. But yeah, it's a Power 5 conference job. So that's going to be attractive, one. And two, like I said, if you look around the campus and you see all the other teams that have built up to what they are now, there's reason to be encouraged that, hey, maybe I can make that happen too, because there's an athletic director who will give you time to implement your process and provide you with resources that you need to help you compete. So I don't think it's an undesirable position. I'm interested to see how it's filled. Moving on now, Dawn wants to know which Pitt player was snubbed from ACC accolades. So I'm recording this Monday evening. A couple hours ago, it was announced that Jeff Capel was the ACC Coach of the Year. Nike Spande was the ACC's Sixth Man of the Year. And Blake Hinson, second team All-ACC, and Jamarius Burton, first team All-ACC. So 4 Panthers receive accolades. A lot different than what Pitt fans are normally used to as far as recognition goes in conference. I know Nike Savannah is the first Pitt player to ever receive an individual award through the ACC recognition, which is a big step in the program, in my opinion, or for the program, I should say. But if we're talking people who are snubbed, I think there are one, if not two. The first one that comes to mind is Federico not being on the All-ACC defensive team. Now, I will say this. I think had Federico played the way he has been playing over the past 2 months, the entire season, he probably is on that list. But Federico's game really didn't start kicking into gear, I think, until January or so. And part of that is because John Hughley wasn't out for the season until early January. So Federico really, I think, stepped up his performance once he knew that he was the only option. He was getting more minutes once Hughley was completely gone. So I think had he played the whole year, he probably finds his way on that list. And I think entering next season, he's a lock, at least to make the preseason list. Is there a preseason list? I don't remember. I did vote in it, but nonetheless, too much stuff going on. But he'll return next year as one of the best defensive front court presences in the ACC. Someone else who I think you could make an argument got snubbed a little bit for recognition would be Nelly Cummings. There are a lot of really talented point guards in the ACC. But Nelly, I think his effort this year deserves some recognition, because you look at just the way he's got so many different people involved in so many different ways on Pitt's offense. And just look at the way he's played this past month in February. I mean, his numbers you could put his numbers in February against any point guard in the ACC, and they would look pretty favorable, in my opinion. So, and that's when the games matter the most, right? In an ACC competition, the final month of conference play. So, I think Nelly probably should have maybe got honorable mention. But he's a guy who's motivated by that stuff. So maybe him not receiving those accolades will fuel his fire here in the postseason. So we'll move on to Eric, who has the final question of the day. Really fly through this one. It's just me. I miss my buddy Chris Carter. We'll have to do the next one together. It's been a while. But Eric wants to know, what's your ACC tournament prediction? How far will Pitt go? And who do you think wins the entire thing? I'm going with Louisville. It'll be a story for the ages. No, I'm just kidding. That would be wild, though. It sounds basic because they're the Vegas favorite right now, but I'm gonna go with Duke. I just think Duke's playing the best basketball out of any team in the ACC right now. I think it's won in at least its last 5. It's back in the AP top 25, which I know means nothing as far as tournament seeding goes or whatever, but just shows that it's trending upward. I think. You see how young the Blue Devils are, but now those guys, they have a full season of experience under their belts, where they've played a tough non-conference schedule, where they played in 2 huge rivalry games against North Carolina, where they've gone head to head against, the Miamis, the Pitts, the NC States, these other tournament teams in their league. And I really like how Duke matches up against the rest of the teams on its side of the bracket. I think it matches up favorably against the Panthers. I think it matches up favorably against the Hurricanes, although Miami did smoke Duke not too long ago, if my memory serves correctly. But maybe that's revenge. Who knows? And it's also, you're picking a North Carolina team to win a tournament in North Carolina. I don't think that's a bad pick. There's a reason why Vegas has the Blue Devils as the top pick. So I'll follow the house. I'll go with the Blue Devils there as my winner. I will say that Pitt wins its first game Wednesday and avoids all the drama. I think it'll beat Florida State. That's my prediction on who will win the 12-13 game. Florida State beats Georgia Tech. Pitt beats Florida State, but I think Pitt will lose to Duke. If Pitt beats Duke, I think Pitt could win the whole thing, because I think a third round against Miami will be really fun, and maybe the Panthers figure out a way to win that one, and you get to the championship. Why not the Panthers then? But yeah, I'll go with Duke. I'll go with Pitt making it to the quarterfinals and losing to the eventual champion Blue Devils. And if I had to pick one sleeper team to win it all, I'll go with Wake Forest. That would be a little chaotic, I think, but when you have the leading scorer like Ty Appleby, and Wake Forest has some talent aside from Appleby, that would be my pick. I don't think it'll happen, but that's my sleeper pick. So Duke to win it all, Pitt to win one game and make it to the quarterfinals, and my long shot would be Wake Forest. So that's all I got for all of you wonderful viewers. As always, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you all for following along throughout the entire regular season for basketball. It's been a blast, but the real fun stuff's coming. Next week, while we do this, we'll have a bracket. How great is that? Hopefully, for the sake of, writing fun stories, the Panthers are in it, and maybe West Virginia and Penn State too, maybe Duquesne as well. How great would that be? We'll find out. We'll definitely know, and I'll talk to you then.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.